One of the places where human design gets confusing is that some of the words, the language, the vocabulary, the lingo, sound like they should mean almost the same thing. For example, manifestor versus manifesting generator, or generator versus manifesting generator. It would be easy to hear these two words and assume that they are simply variations of the same type. One is a hybrid, but it's not generally considered a subtype. Like one is simply a faster version of the other, or one is the pure version and the other is the amalgam, or a manifesting generator is somehow a manifestor just with more energy, or a manifestor is a manifesting generator with less energy. It doesn't really boil down into clean lines like that. And I don't think that it's the most useful way to understand the system, to use the system. Because human design at its best is not about collecting labels or pigeonholing. It really is about learning how to pay attention to a different sort of data stream, mainly like what is the body saying instead of just the mind. It's about looking at the way your energy moves, the way you make decisions, the way you get conditioned, programmed, the way that you override yourself, self-abandon, self-sabotage, the way you try to become easier for other people to understand, even though it means watering yourself down, making yourself small. And this is why I always come back to the same basic truth in my work. And if you've been following my content, you've heard me say this probably in every video, is that you're the expert on being you. Not the chart, not the system, not the person reading your chart, definitely not me. Not anyone online saying something with enough certainty that it starts to sound like the law. But you are the expert on you. Coaches, guides, healers, gurus, they can help us access that information, but you're the only one who's been there for every moment of your life, just like me, just like everyone. And so the chart can be a mirror, it can be a language, it can give shape to the things that we've felt but maybe never had the right words for. But the chart is not meant to replace your lived experience. It's not meant to override discernment. It's just meant to help us get closer to it, to that truth. That's why I call my work with human design assisted life coaching. That word assisted matters. Human design assists in the process. It gives us a map. It helps us notice the patterns. It can point us toward places where we maybe have been living against our own design for a very long time. Maybe we've never once really felt like we've had access to our authentic self. Human design can help us give places to look for and things to practice and explore and experiment with and try. So coaching is where the insight becomes real. Right? We take the insight in the chart and we develop ways of practicing it and experimenting with it. Because it's not enough to just know I'm a manifestor or I'm a manifesting generator. It's really about where am I still betraying myself after all of this personal development, or maybe you're new to it. But after all this time, where am I still betraying myself? Where am I forcing? Where am I hiding? Where am I performing? Where am I calling something alignment when it might actually just be a new way of avoiding? Right? For example, I'm a projector. I don't do that. Where am I analyzing myself endlessly instead of really making different choices? Right? Because all that insight doesn't really matter unless we're doing something with it. That's where action over analysis comes in. Not action as pressure or performance, not action as hustle, not action as one more way to finally prove to others that you've healed enough, that you are worthy of life, that you're here. Maybe you're not spiritual enough, maybe you're not self-aware enough. When I say action, I mean it as embodiment. And human design can help us embody all of these insights, this wisdom that we've gathered through our blood, sweat, and tears over the years. And the moment where insight stops being something beautiful, you understand, and becomes something that we practice. It doesn't have to be performed, it's practiced. So when we talk about manifestors and manifesting generators, I don't want to talk about them as stereotypes. If anything, they're archetypes, right, representing certain energy patterns. But I do not want to say manifestors are just intense initiators and manifesting generators are just chaotic multitaskers. That's too flat. It's not even accurate. What I've noticed is when we avoid that, we allow people to be multidimensional because people aren't flat. So the better question for me is, where does the movement begin? Where do I start to develop momentum? That's the core difference. A manifestor is designed to initiate, to inform. A manifesting generator is designed to respond and then move. That sounds simple, but it changes the whole shape of that person's life from a manifestor to a manifesting generator. And a manifestor has a kind of internal movement that does not always begin because something outside of them asked for it. There can be an urge, a pulse, a private sense that something is ready to begin, or something's ready to end, or something's ready to change, or be transformed, or be integrated. It's a felt sense. It may not arrive with a full explanation. It may not be particularly convenient. It may not come through consensus. It may not wait for the room to understand you. The urge is not there to be understood, it's there to be followed. There's often something in the manifestor energy that moves from the inside out. And because of that, manifestors can have real impact in the world, right? Taking something invisible, something inside, and externalizing it. Their silence can shift that room just as easily as their voice can. Their clarity can open us up to something that we didn't know was there or that was not available or open to us before. A manifester can begin something other people did not know was even possible yet. And so while the manifester is building up a full head of steam, people are still grappling with the fact that I didn't know that was possible. And so manifestors are that powerful, but it requires alignment, self-awareness, and the ability to listen to the real authority, which is for manifestors, not their brain. It happens somewhere in the body. And it can be difficult to live with this, especially early in life, because a lot of manifestors are conditioned around control, being controlled. They're told directly, indirectly, that their natural way of moving about this world is too much, right? As kids, why did you do that? Why didn't you ask? Where are you going? Who said you could do that? Why can't you just be easier? Why is everything a battle with you? And over time, a manifestor may start to believe their energy is the source of these problems, that their energy itself is problematic. So manifestors learn over time to hide their urge, their creativity, their true self, or they learn to push through everyone and become unpopular, disliked, misunderstood even more. They either disappear into silence or they become harder and harder to reach. And these are protection mechanisms because the true self isn't allowed or encouraged to be expressed. So both responses are understandable. If your movement has been consistently interrupted, controlled, questioned, second-guessed, or punished, anger actually makes sense. And anger is the non-self emotion of the manifestor. In human design, the not-self theme for manifestors is often dissected as anger. And I think that's an important word to really handle carefully, because it does not mean manifestors are angry people, rageful people, unsafe people. It means anger can become the signal that something essential in them has been blocked. And for all the other types too, frustration for a generator, sign that something's been blocked. Bitterness for the projector, disappointment for the reflector. Something in them wants to move and the world keeps kind of grabbing their arm and holding them back, or at least that's what it feels like. Something in them wants to begin and everyone keeps asking for a permission slip, the right to do that. How dare you? Something in them wants space and people keep turning their independence into a character flaw. So the manifestor path is not about becoming less powerful. It's not about becoming more docile. It's not about becoming more socially acceptable or easier to be around. It's about becoming less defended. And there's a difference. A manifestor does not need to shrink their impact in order to be accepted. In fact, it might be the opposite. They actually have to follow and create from their impact in order to really feel accepted. It's a show, don't tell scenario, right? Which is why informing is the path forward. But they don't need to treat every relationship like a threat to their freedom, right? That's the shadow. That's where informing comes in. And I know, quote unquote, informing can sound like such a small word for such a large thing, right? The manifestors have this incredibly large energy inside of them. And so informing is not about asking permission. It's not about over-explaining. It's not submitting your life to the emotional climate of everyone else who's around you. It's simply letting people know what is happening before your next move impacts them. Because a lot of times people will try to hold us back like crabs in a pot, pulling us back down because they just don't understand what's going on and they're worried that it's going to have a negative impact on them, whether that manifests consciously or unconsciously. So informing sounds like this. I'm going to go do this thing. I'm not available for that. This is changing and I'm going to create that change. I need some space. I'm starting something. I'm leaving this thing behind. Not because the manifestor needs approval, but because their energy has an impact on other people. And the more that they can inform, the more those people will get out of their way. And it sounds harsh, but I mean that logistically, just letting them do their thing, the manifestor. And the mature expression of the manifestor energy is not, I do whatever I want and everyone else can deal with it. The mature manifestation is a little bit different because that is not freedom. That is just another kind of avoidance, telling people I'm going to do this and you can't stop me. And so the mature manifestor begins from an inner authority and still stays in relationship with the world, right? Like having your feet on the ground and your head in the clouds at the same time. Sovereignty without cruelty, movement without secrecy, impact without unnecessary resistance or interruption. That's a very different thing from just saying, I do what I want. It's about awareness. It's about being able to still read the room, but not shrink as a result of the data that we're getting from that room. Now, manifesting generators have a totally different rhythm. And again, a manifestor and a manifesting generator are very different. And one's not a watered down or trumped up version of the other. Manifesting generators can also be fast. They can also be powerful. They can also be hard to contain, like atomic energy. They can also dislike being managed, limited, or forced into something that feels like a tiny linear version of themselves. They may not always find clarity by sitting still and thinking about it for 3 weeks. They may need to try the actual thing. A manifesting generator might need to touch the work, enter the conversation, make the draft, follow that pull or that urge. Let the body discover what is true by being in contact with life, right? Not thinking about it, not studying it, but actually making contact with life. This is one of the beautiful things about manifesting generators, is that they can synthesize and alchemize. They can move between worlds, the generator and the manifester. They can be efficient in ways other people do not understand, finding shortcuts or workarounds. They can skip steps and then come back and fix the steps that actually mattered. They're curious, clever, creative, witty. They can take 5 things that looked unrelated and somehow build a life out of the pattern underneath them, right? Finding patterns, being quirky. But because their energy can move quickly, manifesting generators also confuse like movement with truth, capital T truth. And that's where the work really begins, because not every impulse is a response or deserves a response. Not every spark is a yes. Not every pivot is alignment. Sometimes a pivot is just wisdom. Sometimes it's avoidance. Sometimes the energy is complete. Sometimes the discomfort is just the messy part of the process where you are being asked to stay, to push through. This is why manifesting generators need a very honest relationship with their sacral responses and their authority. Not the mental story around the response, not the fantasy of the response, definitely not the fear of missing out dressed up as intuition, the actual body. Is there energy here to do this? Is there satisfaction available here if I do this? Is this alive, or am I trying to escape the feeling of being limited? Is that a figment of my imagination, or have I been limited and I'm pushing against this lifelong pattern? Is this a real yes, or am I just excited because it's new? Shiny object syndrome. That question matters, because manifesting generators are often conditioned to be ashamed of their own rhythm. It can look chaotic from the outside. They might be told that they're scattered or have ADHD, or they move too fast, or they're too interested in too many different things. They're too hard to follow. Their thoughts don't connect. You need to be more linear. They're told to pick one lane, stay in it, finish everything, explain every challenge, become easier to categorize. And so they start mistrusting themselves. I'm a manifesting generator, and I relate to all that. I have always felt misunderstood. Manifesting generators either force themselves to become more linear than they really are, or they rebel against the structure that's being imposed on them. But neither one is quite right. The manifesting generator's path is not to become a perfectly linear personality, and it's also not to abandon every commitment the second the energy shifts. It's about becoming clear. It's to learn the difference between a true change in energy and a refusal to be present with the discomfort. That's maturity. For a manifester, the question is often, am I free to move without hiding, explaining, or asking the whole world for permission? That's the manifester. The manifesting generator might ask, am I responding to what is actually alive, or am I just moving because stillness makes me uncomfortable? Both types can be this powerful. Both types can be disruptive. Both types can be misunderstood, but the medicine is not the same. The manifester is here to trust the inner urge and communicate the impact before they take action, just informing. The manifesting generator, on the other hand, is here to trust the sacral response and to let life refine the path through movement. Even if you're an emotional generator, that sacral still matters because it's still defined. A manifester initiates from within, a manifesting generator responds to life, and then moves quickly, often creatively, often non-linearly, often in a way that only makes sense to them and to the world after the fact. And this is where I think human design becomes less about type and more about awareness, because so much of what we call personality is actually adaptation. A manifester who's been controlled may become secretive. A manifesting generator who's been shamed may become over-explaining. A manifester who has been interrupted too many times may stop telling people what they're doing and do everything behind the scenes. A manifesting generator who's been called inconsistent or ADHD too many times long enough might think there's something truly wrong with them. And this is why I do not like using human design as a weapon or an excuse. The point is not to say, well, I'm this type, and so I guess this is who I am. The point is to become more honest, more responsible, more aware of what works and what doesn't, more accepting of our own nature, but also more willing to see where our nature got tangled with protection. Self-acceptance is not the same thing as self-excuse. A manifester can say, I'm here to initiate and still learn how to communicate better. A manifesting generator can say, I'm here to move non-linearly and still learn how to complete, repair, and follow through when something still needs to get done, when something truly matters. The chart does not remove our responsibility. It gives us responsibility, or it gives our responsibility a more accurate shape so that we can kind of know what we're doing in the contours. And this is where the coaching part matters even more, because otherwise human design can just become another kind of beautiful place to hide in the wonderment of the universe. A manifestor can hide inside independence, just like a manifesting generator can hide inside of chaos. A manifestor can say, no one understands me, and still never practice letting people in. A manifesting generator can say, my energy has changed, and never ask whether they are running from the part where commitment becomes real. And I say that with tenderness, not judgment, because all of us protect ourselves somehow. We find ways of staying safe. We become useful or impressive or unavailable or endlessly busy or endlessly self-aware or impossible to pin down or very, very good at explaining why we cannot do something or why we did something. Human design can help us see that as the pattern and interrupt it. But action is where the pattern changes, not in studying the chart and knowing all the different moving parts of a chart. So if you're a manifester, the action might be simple but uncomfortable. Tell people what you're doing before the resistance kicks in, before they start trying to interrupt. Let your urge be real without making it a secret. Stop waiting for everyone to understand what you're up to before you begin. That's actually a good sign for a manifester if people don't really get it. And stop turning every need for communication into evidence that people are trying to control you. They might be. If you're a manifesting generator, the actions might be different. Stop trying to make your life look linear just so it can be easily understood by others. Giving yourself time to practice the sacral response, listening to the body, letting yourself experiment, letting yourself move differently, but also tell the truth about whether the movement, right, the actions you're taking are coming from aliveness or from avoidance or from people pleasing. Both types are learning freedom, but they're learning it through different doorways. Right? For the manifester, freedom is often the freedom to initiate without being controlled or micromanaged. For the manifesting generator, freedom is often the freedom to follow the living response without being shamed for changing shape. And both types, manifester and manifesting generator, need discernment, because freedom without discernment becomes absolute chaos, and discernment without freedom becomes a holding pen. So this is the balance. This is why I care less about people memorizing every detail of their chart and more about what they do with the parts that they already understand. If you know you are a manifester, where are you still asking permission from the world when you're not meant to be asking for permission? Where are you hiding from your movement and then feeling angry later that people are surprised by how quickly you move or how idiosyncratically you move through the world? Where could one clean sentence reduce half the resistance in your life, informing? And if you know you're a manifesting generator, where are you still apologizing for having a life that moves in seasons instead of one long linear track? Where are you clinging to some old version of yourself because people understand that version and they don't understand the real you? Where are you hiding behind wanting to be accepted, wanting validation, right? If that validation is holding you back. These are questions to live with. It's not the whole point for me, not analysis forever, not one more layer of self-description, not becoming fluent in a system while your actual life stays exactly the same, right? That's like a hobby. Human design to me is more useful when it brings you back into contact with what is already honest in you. The manifestor's honest urge, the manifesting generator's honest response, the place before performance, the place before explanation, the place before you started turning yourself into someone easier to approve of or easier to love. And maybe that is the deeper similarity between these two types. Both can carry a kind of wildness that the world tries to manage or tamp down. The manifestor's wildness is the urge to begin and go and do. The manifesting generator's wildness is the aliveness that kind of refuses to move in a straight line, just because straight lines are easier to explain or more culturally understood and accepted. Neither is wrong, neither is better, they're just different. They're just different forms of life trying to manifest through each of us and express through our type. So the work is not to become more like the other. The manifestor isn't trying to become a manifesting generator or vice versa. The manifestor does not need to become a responder just to be safe. The manifesting generator does not need to become a primary initiator just to feel powerful, right? We do some of each. They both have to come home to the body intelligence that's just waiting there. For the manifestor, it might sound like, I can move from my own authority and I can let my impact be known without over-explaining or asking permission. The manifesting generator, it might sound like, I can trust what lights me up and I can let my path be discovered through my response, not through the perfect 5-year plan. This is human design-assisted life coaching, taking the information in the chart and finding its place in the world, using the chart to enter the world more honestly, not worshiping the system, listening to it, listening through it, not analyzing forever, but practicing, trying, experimenting, playing, repairing, choosing, feeling that agency, that sovereignty, that autonomy, moving through the world autonomously, letting the insight become visible in our behavior instead of our explanation of our behavior. Because at the end of the day, the chart does not live your life, you do. If you're enjoying this content, please like, comment, subscribe. If you have ideas for other areas that you'd like to see me exploring here in my videos, please drop those in to the comments or send me a direct message. I also have a big community on Instagram. I can be found at I am Zach Carlson, and Zach is Z-A-C-H and Carlson is C-A-R-L-S-E-N. Thank you for being here.